What's up, everybody? Episode 2 of the stand-up. You know, it's literally the first true business day of the year where kind of everybody just wakes up and school is back in session if you're living here in New York and like back to reality, and so are we. And so we're kicking off the year really strong. I saw something this morning from shout out to Mike Fata. He's been on the Strictly from Nowhere podcast historically. And he was like, does anybody else feel like a racehorse just like dying to just get out of the stable and just run this freaking race? And he's like, yo, that's a sign of like being stoked about what you're working on and like having great energy and positivity. And like, if you don't feel like that, maybe you're not working on the right problem every day. Anywho, I feel like a freaking racehorse. You know, I'm just getting shot out of a cannon over here. We got a lot of stuff cooking. So we got a couple topics to cover for today, Mike. We're going to talk about, we just had a brand new hire start. That's always super fun. I think that's one of the goals and metrics that we try to measure ourselves on is growth, like team growth and providing gainful employment here. So we could talk a little bit about what that means. We also just killed a meeting, a recurring weekly meeting. We could talk about what that one looks like. I think that's going to strike a chord for lots of teams, especially agencies, internal teams building products. Like, what did we kill? We'll talk about that one. We're contemplating the idea of like, does more meetings equal more success? We can talk a little bit about that one. And then, of course, we're releasing products and projects all the time. And I think we have a really cool demos pack for today. But what's up, dude? Welcome to episode 2.
I'm stoked to be here. I love the racehorse analogy. I felt exactly like that, like Sunday night going into Monday, like because New Year, it's just that's business, dude. Like you also know that like the first 6 months of business are fucking critical, absolutely critical. And
Totally.
it's when mega sales happen. We're coming into this month with more recurring revenue than we've ever had historically. Historically, December, January, February are very, very rough. And I don't
Do you
know
want
if
to
you're
say
like
the number just so we could like bookmark it on February 5th?
Yeah. We got $115,000 in monthly recurring revenue at this moment. No, not special projects, just kind of booked. Now, in the agency game, this isn't like a software tool. Some of that revenue may drop off in 3 months or 4 months as the projects naturally come to a close. But right now in our kind of service model, that's where we're at. This is the beauty of the tool we're going to be launching because it shows us exactly how much runway we can see with the contracts we have, which is great. So that's the shout out, the plug for fin forecasting if you're an agency person. But we have never started a January like that high. I think the highest recurring revenue we've ever had was maybe like 150 or something like that. And then like it'll do this, it'll like kind of creep up over. We've gone from like 150 all the way down to like 40 in like a month and literally rose it back up again. So I want everyone to know, if you're an agency watching this, there is like this coming at this like a racehorse, but I'm also nervous as hell because I know that can happen, dude. Like people are like, yo, you could lose a lot of customers overnight. Some kind of thing could happen. The economy doesn't feel as precarious as it was, but I'd say like end of 2023, it felt like every single big company slashed every single project that they had and basically sucked all their capital back into the coffers and was like, we're not spending on any of this stuff anymore. Had nothing to do with us, had nothing to do with us failing in those projects. It was just like out of our hands. It felt like a doomsday scenario. And that always looms in the back of my head. But it feels different now. Things don't feel like we were always kind of knowing that was happening, that there were like mass layoffs happening. I think a lot of that has bottomed out and we're sort of sitting in the bottom of the valley as like this industry just crawls up out of it. So that's my thought, dude. That's the number bookmarked. It's the best January we've ever had. And I'm hoping to God that is a great signal for the rest of this year because, the goal for us is to get to over 200, which we've never seen before.
And I think, we're coming in with a really fat pipeline. We're coming in with this, goal we talked about on the last episode of trying to figure out how to crack the code of doing business on purpose. all that being said, we're bringing on new team members. We are growing. It may be by one head at a time. It's not like I have an entire team I need to hire for. But that's also, comes back to some advice that we got from some crazy Marine at a networking event to keep it small, keep it all. You really don't need to just bloat because of the sake of it. We don't even have the luxury of doing something like that. So shout out to new team members coming on board. That's just really a great sign for us and some of our core goals that we want to accomplish providing gainful employment here. I think it also is a really interesting time. Not only are we coming in with legacy projects that trust us with their vision, but we also have new projects that are kicking off in January, which is like historically has eluded us because pipeline dries up in December historically, which didn't happen this year. And so now in January, you're kicking off brand new projects. Like that is just an anomaly that has not happened really over the years. And historically, we've had a pretty rough Q1 because momentum is really just, it takes a while to close deals. So, I'm really optimistic of what January is bringing in here. I want to pivot us for a second and talk a little bit about killing meetings. It's one thing to set meetings and like we have a very healthy, call it customer success motion here as we service our customers but one of the things that we really try to focus on is the idea that more meetings does not equal more success. More meetings is context switching. More meetings is, opportunity to tangent or, we call it spiking. Like more meetings does not necessarily mean more momentum, doesn't mean more output. And so we have kind of twofold on that topic. One is we just killed today. We talked about it yesterday on a Sunday. We killed today a weekly internal stand-up, which we would burn down the entire book, talk about what's going on in each account, good, bad, ugly, whatever it might be. And you and me were talking about it last night about how like I don't really find that valuable anymore. I'm not sure I ever really did find it valuable. I'm not really even sure that it was originally for me. I think it was for you and me and the project team to think about where our priorities are. But it wasn't really yielding in the way that I would hope that it was. It wasn't like it was igniting this Monday fire and like burn down the week. And like, no, we play a lot of offense. And, I think defensively, the best way to operate defense is to always be shipping. And so if you're always shipping and you're always on top of your project list, like there's nothing really to chase and burn down. So to me, I was like, why are we having this meeting? It's just like it's just a bookend. So I'm curious, what was like your thought? Because obviously we were both aligned on this for some time where like it's just not providing the value that we wanted it to provide. We stood with this for 6 months?
6, yeah, something like that.
And so we've done stand-ups before. If you work in a business where you have like your, daily 9 a.m. stand-up, what's everybody working on, any blockers, what's your task list for the day, et cetera, et cetera. I've had those be successful in the past. I've had them be just a total freaking drag. But I've also had them in the real time right now where it's just like it's not producing. There's no real goal associated to it. Feels just we're doing it to do it. And so maybe we'll see it again when it has a little bit more purpose and we can assign some real goals to it. But for right now, it just felt like a meeting to have a meeting to have a meeting, which is not my jam.
Yeah, well, I hearken it back to like the Mythical Man month, where it's the idea that if you add more developers to a project, the project goes slower, not faster. And I think that when you feel very scattered or there's like a bunch of problems coming up at once, you're like, okay, let's schedule a recurring meeting so we can like stay on top of this. And in reality, that's not, it doesn't work. Like, and I've made this mistake with developers in the past where I'm like, I'm going to add another person to it because that'll make it go faster, and it never does. And you kind of, sometimes you're like, oh, maybe it's wrong. Maybe I'm going to do it different. I find that once I have to start tightening the grip and putting more meetings in place, there's usually some other kind of misalignment that needs to be fixed. In this case, what I want is, hey, call a meeting if there's a problem. But what really should have been happening was the project team needs to be internally on their own, running through their project list, saying, okay, I need to talk to Mike about that. Like, but that was not happening. So now that we've done that and we had a whole bunch of meetings where nothing's happening, it's like, all right, you're showing up. I don't really need to hear that you've been assigned 20 projects and everything's going well. What I need is for you to do this internally every Monday or every day, whatever. And if there's a problem, call a meeting with me when that happens. And
Correct.
You need my help. And raise the bubble. We don't need a regular meeting for that. Like, you got to be doing that all the time. That's just kind of a part of your habit. And I've always come back to this great Kent Beck quote that I say is like, I'm not a great developer. I'm just a good developer with great habits. I want the same thing. I think that applies to anything in life. Just have good habits. That's it. Like, you know what I mean? Just have good habits, and you will raise the alarm when the time comes, and we will have a meeting if we need to. We will not if we don't. But in an async world, that's the way it works. So that's my feeling on the stand-up meeting. Like, we don't need to do that all the time.
That's right.
And it's it.
That's right. And I think like really the learning is this should be happening constantly and asynchronously in everybody's brain.
Yeah.
Like you don't necessarily have to have a meeting. I don't have like layers of management. There's not like some, I'm not coming down on anybody. Like I don't need the visibility. No, I'm like looking at books. I'm looking at the customer and I'm saying, am I up to date with this customer? Do I have anything that like was not answered? Have I not spoken to them in like 2 weeks? Do I need to like just say hi, I exist? This should just be happening constantly. And so if we're ever sitting with time on our hands with nothing really to do, there's a whole list of customers that could require anything from you. And so how do you make yourself valuable constantly? It's not just this Monday morning stand up, burn down the book. I felt like this for a little while. This really has to just be like ingrained in the role of constantly being available, constantly producing value for your customers, and internally too, like producing value for your team. So this is just a constant thing that I think needs to be done. It's again more about the habitual practice of it on a daily basis than it is, 52 meetings in a year. Had to have one a week, forget that.
And the other thing is, if you and I, like our goal from last Friday is we have to remove ourselves from some of the day-to-day operations. We have to kind of let the plane fly a little bit. And this was like an example of us babysitting.
I mean, dude, this is mass discomfort for me. So like, you know me, I spent my entire career in client services, and you have one primary goal in client services, which is be slightly ahead of your customer. Like, know exactly where they are, but be slightly ahead. Anticipate what comes next. Anticipate where the next value or problem is going to come from. And so for me, moving out of an individual contributor role and more into a leadership role and kind of releasing the intentional visibility that I've maintained over the years is very uncomfortable. Like what I'm just like not supposed to know where half the book is at any given time, and like that's okay. But like I'm okay to do that as long as I know that the rest of the team is embodying what I'm saying, which is at least be at par, if not slightly ahead of where your customer is currently. So when I start seeing all of that happening, like religion, like maybe I'll feel a little less stressed out about it. But like, man, I'm as dialed in with every customer as I possibly can be. Like that just allows me to sleep at night rather than scratching my head where is customer X. So I don't know. I'll have to get over that. That's my own thing as well. Just to like move and mature, and like that's part of the goal is like removing us from the day to day so we can focus on, bigger picture stuff. So, I want to pivot us again just a little bit. We're releasing stuff constantly here. One of which we talked about a little bit on Friday on episode 1, which was the let's call it the atrophy problem, the AI atrophy problem. And so you have felt this. I have felt this too, where I just did it this morning. We created a tool that is giving us lead gen opportunities, scraping the web. If you're curious about it, send me a DM. Maybe I'll even share it with you. And in this tool, it's using AI generated email responses. And while I find that tool to be very convenient, I also am like very hyper aware of the fact that like I'm going to get lazier and lazier about writing valuable email responses to a lead opportunity because I'm relying on the AI to do the review of the opportunity, to make it personal, to sound like me, to do the heavy lifting, and all I have to do is some copy and pasting. And so this complacency, this atrophy of the skill is a real thing. And so you're very aware of it because as a developer, if you take a month off, you just lose like the dexterity in the fingertips. You like lose it's not on the tip of your tongue anymore type of feeling. And so that's kind of a dangerous annoyance of what's happening in the world of AI, or not having consistent work. And so we talk about this, especially as we're taking a look at new candidates and like how are people staying current and how are you leveling up? and you don't always have a project to work on in a different language or a different tool, or sometimes we're pigeonholed in our careers working on the same damn problem for a decade. And so you creatively think about ways to level yourself up. We're blessed because we have lots of projects all year long. You can choose whatever you think is the best collection of tools, languages, frameworks, products, services, solutions, and you have the luxury of that. But not everybody does. And so I'm stoked for what you built. Another open source project. That's 2 in a month. That's like some kind of record. 2 open source projects in a month. But this one I find to be really cool because, well, I won't steal the show. Tell me a little bit about Code Dojo.
Yeah. So I kind of had, like we talked about, I had this idea that what if we used AI as sort of a trainer or a coach or a mentor or a sensei to help us get better at writing code, and we made a daily coding practice. I think that one of the things I've adopted is it's impossible for me to not use AI because my business is speed and quality, and time is money, and this is what people pay, and I have to use the most efficient methods available. But one of the side effects of that is, and I think you've seen this if you've been on Twitter X and if you've been on LinkedIn, there are people out there that finally are admitting, and I'll admit it too, like I haven't really been in my IDE, my text editor. I haven't really been typing code for a few months now. And for languages that I'm very familiar in, things like JavaScript and TypeScript, I don't necessarily think there's a ton of atrophy. There may be some, but like, I'm used, but we've recently adopted Ruby on Rails for a number of projects because I've found, for a number of reasons. And I came back to it earlier this year, but I found that my Ruby was kind of rusty. And because I was using AI, I was getting better at reading. I'm reading the Ruby and I was like, oh yeah, I know what that is. But then when it came time to write it, it was sort of I was conspicuous. Like I was like, I was like, does the do go before or after the pipes? What's the method again for reduce? I knew what the JavaScript equivalent was, but I didn't know the Rubyism of it. And so then I started refreshing it by reading some Ruby books. But once again, you're reading the books and you're reading the code. And there's a difference between like reading the code and writing the code. And you'll find, just like a lot of people we talked about the idea of like, I'm fluent in Spanish, but I can't write it for some reason, right? So there's that effect that starts to happen. Like people who speak Spanish in the household tend to be fluent in Spanish, but they don't know all the rules. Like they couldn't write grammatically correct Spanish on paper. And so I found that was starting to happen to me a little bit with Ruby. And I said, I had this idea of like, what if I made a dojo and it was AI driven and it issued me problems daily, and then I'd solve them and I could like stay in the problem. And it's kind of expanded into this entire method of learning where now I'm thinking, could I apply this to other things outside of code? Now, it is a free open source project. It makes sense if you're a coder because you'll know how to pull from Git. And this also gets you back in your IDE so you stay fresh. I'm like staying fresh with Vim, and I'm keeping my fingers moving in that thing every single day. But it comes back to this idea. I'm a learn by doing kind of person. And I've always thought to myself, what would happen if I did this for another topic, like anatomy and physiology? And if you guys, I have a demo video, but what it'll do is it gives you an assessment of 4 problems. You're meant to solve them to the best of your ability, but you don't go look anything up. You stay right there. And so I did it with Common Lisp because I had no concept of it other than like I've written some Clojure years ago, or did some problems, and I fumbled through the whole thing, and I was like, I don't know, is this the method? And it was, and the AI was able to detect that I was a programmer who was familiar with programming, not familiar with Lisp, and it said, I'm going to give you an assessment, try and pattern match this. And I was able to pattern match, and it like ranked, and it figured out where I was at, and then it starts to issue problems. And it was the same thing with Ruby. It even said it looks like you're a JavaScript developer just by the way you're trying to solve the problem. We'll work through it, and it's figuring out the gaps in my knowledge. And I did a problem this morning because again, because I'm coming from another programming language, I'm moving through the problems very quickly because I know how to solve it. I just don't know I was like, oh, the initializer function or like instance variables, like where do they belong? Again, from reading code that AI is outputting, and you're not truly, it's not that you're not truly learning it. You're learning it in like a very passive way, and you'll never find yourself able to write. And I think this happens, and the effect that I describe it as is if you're an engineer who's in a job, you probably don't do any leet code style problems, which are like these just like code puzzles, I'll say, like they're not really, because your day-to-day job doesn't involve a lot of that. And then every couple of years, you'll get laid off, or you'll want a new job. You'll see a job posting, and suddenly you got to get up on leet code again. And you're out of practice, so you go and do a bunch of practice problems, and then over the first few are really terrible, and then you're like, okay, I'm back, I got it back, I'm ready to go interview. This is also good for that because a lot of the problem sets are very leet code-esque. And so if you said I wanted to learn, like, another thing I was thinking about is I'm not up on like the latest CSS because I don't write a ton of CSS anymore, but that used to be my thing, was front end design. And then I was like, maybe I want to train that again. And then I could get up on all the new things, and it'll figure out where I'm at, where my gaps are. And I just found it like a totally new way to learn. So what I could do is I could just share what I'm not going to sit here and bore you with the typing. I'll just show you the session from this morning and how it kind of broke it down. And I think it's very cool. I think it's such a very interesting way to learn because it's the same way you probably have learned sports, where it's like, okay, we're going to throw a tennis ball out, and if you totally whiff the ball, we know you have no hand-eye coordination. We got to start somewhere else. If you hit it, but like launch it over the fence, it's like, maybe you played baseball. We got to learn how to brush that kind of thing. So the AI is so good at figuring out where you're at, where you've been, and kind of helping you through that. So let me share. Let me share my screen.
While you're sharing it, I'd love to ask you a question, which is, very clearly this could be a monetizable platform. Like, very easily could see, just take the developer persona, being willing to pay a subscription to participate in this. Why did you feel like you wanted to release this open source?
So there's a few reasons specifically for developers. One is I think if I had done it as like a web app, you would be in some kind of a VS Code emulator. I'd have to figure out how to run code on the server also, which is like how Code Wars does it and some of these other websites. And it would turn into like an entire infrastructure project. For me, you need to be using the tools you want to stay sharp in. For me, I want to be using Tmux. I want to be using NeoVim. I want to be, I'm not historically a Vim user. I want to get better at that. So it's like, for a developer, I want you to be in your tooling locally and just like use your tooling and let AI sit alongside you. And then I also see this as a way, and I'm going to incorporate some of this into it, like projects, where you actually could now start building some projects and not just, and have the AI not write the code for you, but act as a coach, kind of like the way you'd say to a professor, hey, am I doing this right? And they'd look and they'd say, hey, you are, but you could do this better. That kind of thing. So I want it to be a method to stay sharp. For developers, I really think you need to be using your tooling on your machine. I truly don't know. Like, for me, like, making money, to me, the monetizable thing for this is other subjects and like other tooling around this method of learning. But for me, this tool specifically, I just wanted to put it out there. I even think it's like a cool way to interview someone. If you have trouble coming up with code problems and stuff, like, just fire up the Code Dojo and say, I want to learn language you want to test them in. I want to learn React. Let them run through it. And let the dojo, because it's issuing new problems all the time. So I have a lot of ideas around what a paid version could look like for something like this, but it is like more infrastructurally intensive and things like that. I just wanted to get this out. I built this for me, and again, for developers, you got to be using the tools you want to use on your machine. You should have your programming language installed. Like, you'll see, I did that with Common Lisp. I was like using it and didn't install the language, so I had to go and install the language. So because you are truly trying to learn something. So I'm sharing, you can see my session. Let's just let me toggle over to it. Can you see me like moving and grooving in here? Cool,
Yep,
cool.
gotcha.
So let me go to the top of the session because you can obviously see I've been doing this every day, and these are all of so inside of Ruby, this was the Common Lisp. It has like a history and everything, but then every language or everything you're trying to learn, and I'll zoom this a little bit so maybe it's a little easier, gives you a folder inside of skills. So you're able to kind of see in here, and then this is your workspace, right? And so what it did was it created a problem for me today called this playlist analyzer, and I'm going to roll up to the top of my chat with Claude Code here. So, and I'll show you kind of how I So perfect thing is you start with it. It cleared my old session, right? But I just said, went in today, I said train Ruby. That's it. And it said like training session day 4, belt white, streak 3 days, focus, enumerable shortcuts, right? This is like starting from the beginning, and it gave me a problem. And then it's talking about this is a perfect opportunity to use Ruby's enumerable methods directly. Select, map, sort by, sum, rather than each plus accumulator patterns. Because I was falling back to some of the things I knew from JavaScript and that I remembered from Ruby, but there's like a whole bunch of methods that I was not leveraging because I just wasn't utilizing them. So it kind of, it brings me in, it gives me this problem of building a playlist analyzer and giving me the required methods, the example usage. And then if you look in Starter, this is my solution, but you can see there's like a little tester in here that it'll run for me. And so you can take a look at like one of the areas where I missed, right? Like I kind of went in, I did total duration. I used a function called inject, which is the JavaScript equivalent is reduce to calculate the total duration of a song. And what's interesting is that there's actually a sum method. And like here, let me just show you. So the first thing I did was I wrote a code comment in here because I was typing the brackets with like the symbols, this to access a key. Again, not important what I was doing, but I was wondering if I could use dot notation because I kept reaching. I was thinking that. And so I just like wrote a code comment in here that was like, can I use dot notation instead of, you know, the symbol? These are called symbols in Ruby, right? And like I wasn't sure. And so what I wrote back to the chat was like, hey, I wrote some Aston, but I had a question about dot notation that I wanted to give it a review. It took, and it said, look, it was a good instinct to ask before running. There are a few things that will crash, and it let me know now, hey, you have to use this bracket notation. Dot notation calls a method of an object, which is it's like a function, a thing, you know. So immediately I was like, oh, okay, now I know, right? But that might have been something that I either just didn't explore or that I had to like run into, but it's just again a moment of I want you to focus on solving the problem. Don't be afraid to do something the wrong way and then say, hey, I know I might not be doing this right. And that's great. And then it went ahead and kind of looked at the rest of my work and it said, okay, you need to fix that. But like, for example, I forgot a comma between the A and the B in the pipes, which was like, again, like this was just something that when you're reading code, you don't focus that tightly. And it was, you know, it was an honest mistake that like, I just was like, you're right, comma between the arguments and the pipes and a block in Ruby. We don't have this pipe block concept in JavaScript at all. The other thing that was, you know, I love about Ruby that's so nice is this song title, if song artist equals artist. In JavaScript, we don't have that concept either. It would have been like an if you have like a what's called a ternary operator, or you'd have like a short circuiting and if you're using like a React type idiom. But this was something in my last session that the coach helped me through. It was like, hey, you know, you can do this. And I learned, and again, it understands that I'm coming from somewhere else trying to just become a better Rubyist. And then it talked about method chaining with dots because I had originally written this. I didn't know there was a filter map function, and I had originally just written a select function, but it was letting me know that select doesn't map. You either have to select and map, or you could use filter map. And again, now that's added to my repertoire of things that I know about this. And then of course I had forgotten, you know, something quite simple here that it quickly went through. Then when it found it, it's like, this was great, but then you missed the sum. And it let me know that like, hey, instead of using inject here, you could actually use a sum method. Again, a thing that I did not know was available to me, which is you can simply use this sum enumerable that'll loop over the array and pull out the duration. And now I know it evaluates, saves my progress, says, hey, you're moving up in the world, right? Like default parameters, doing great, enumerable. So from what I messed up in my assessment, it's re-quizzing me on these things, and I'm moving in the right direction. It's actually, and I got the new concept, right? Filter map saves that. And so now I can always do something like a progress report which is another cool command. And it'll generate a quick progress report of where I'm at for what I'm training, which is great. So this is just such a great example of it gets me typing. I'm using Tmux, I'm using my NeoVim, I'm in my IDE, but you stay in it. So like think about what I think about too is just other subjects. We had kind of mentioned like what does an anatomy class look like? Like if it asked you like could you explain to me how blood flow in the heart works? Instead of me reading a book on that, what if I just like the way to do it was, hey, I'm not sure, but I kind of remember ventricles and aortas, da 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 da. This is what I think. No multiple choice, no multiple guessing. You type what you think, and then the AI says, based on what you responded to, I'm going to explain this to you the proper way. And so I feel like there's an entire learning method based in here, and like you can see that there's like showing the white belt, 4 out of 10 concepts. It's checking. One of the key pieces to the Code Dojo is just like a belt in martial arts. It's not enough to just do a thing one time. You need to continuously demonstrate that you have mastered that you know like hey you're doing these things consistently over and over and over again, and we've tested you on it, and you see like and then it'll show me these weak aspects, right? It just the fact that I asked about dot notation though, letting me know like, hey, you still feel shaky on this. String formatting, sprintf format, not yet natural, integer division, gotcha. Like these little that is a really interesting gotcha too. There's like this integer division thing when you want floats in Ruby. Long story short, things that don't happen in JavaScript that are happening in Ruby, and it knows these things, and it knows, hey, I want to come back and address those weak spots and level you up. So in order to get to the yellow belt, you got to consistently demonstrate this. And then the next thing is when you get all the way to black belts don't just stop training. So I really want to do like another one for TypeScript, which is something that I'm much more masterful in, but I want to do those every day so that I don't lose the skill. So, and maybe I don't do that one every day. Maybe that's like a once a week kind of thing. You train a little less frequently. I don't know exactly what the right learning path is there, but long story short, because I'm rambling now, is you really want to stay masterful at the things you're masterful at, and you want to level up at the things that you're going to get better at, and this really helps you do that. I'm excited. That's what I'll say.
I can tell. And we'll drop a link to the open source repository. That'll be part of the show notes. I'm curious if you're able to monitor usage from anybody else that downloads this and wants to play with it.
I am not. It's truly all local to your machine, all the progress, all of that stuff. It's really going to live only for you. So you don't have to worry about me monitoring you. But if you want, I would appreciate some GitHub stars.
That'd be fun.
You could start on GitHub if you find it useful and helpful. I really do. And again, I like this stuff. I enjoy learning in general. So even with AI, I just want to get better at all of the things. Like I was thinking the other day, I would never read a book on assembly language. Never. Like, I mean, I have, but not like I read it. Again, like we talked about, passively reading it, understanding how it works. I would love to sit here and be like, I want to learn assembly. And it'll make me solve problems using assembly. And like just to learn it. Like another thing in my career, how many of you out there, I was mostly a front end engineer. How many of you out there like use an ORM but didn't properly learn SQL? Like I could fumble my way through some SQL, but I am far from a master. And so like I want to train SQL. And so like these are all things that there's all these things that are on my list, books on the wall, programming books that you just never get to. For me, this is a way more fun way to learn. Is just like, give me a problem, let me fumble through it, let me do in the keystrokes. You will learn this way if this is your method, as opposed to just reading and again, letting the agent just do things for you. So, it's those little things. It's the commas between the pipes. It's the where does the do statement go? It's that stuff is not, and whether or not you think it's important for your job or not is irrelevant. I just think it's important for your mind to be an expert. Don't be an expert beginner. I'm trying to be an expert every day. I'm trying to get better at things every single day. And you know, as a manager, as a CTO, as a art, you don't get to code as much. You know, like there's probably a lot of you engineering managers out there too. Probably haven't, you know, just don't get to code very much. You're doing a lot of managerial stuff. So like this is a great way to get your hands back on the keyboard. I found that the problem sets really take less than an hour. Some of them this one I did was under like 20 minutes or so. You know, so like it's a quick little thing. It's a little workout. It's a little workout for the mind.
Well, I love it, dude. Maybe you'll make a little subdomain landing page for us so we can
Yeah,
get
I think I'll get better. I'll get better with that. That's for sure.
cool. Well, dude, welcome to episode 2. We'll get back to work, and we'll see you tomorrow on episode 3.
Stand down.